and you're on the leader in pure classic country, 98.7 and AM 1580 WLIJ. We are getting ready for the Great American Race, the 66th running of the Daytona 500, and what a guest to start out 2024. Lead turn announcer for MRN. He's also the host of the flagship afternoon drive program, SiriusXM Speedway, on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio Channel 90 weekdays from 2 to 6. It's the Godfather, Dave Moody. How are you this weekend, sir?
I am wonderful. I'm in Daytona Beach. We've fired up race engines in anger already this week. It's hard to be much better than that.
We've had a couple of guests, of course, throughout last season. Had the pleasure of talking to Mike Bagley twice, and I had to ask him, there's the postman, there's the bagman. I think I need to ask you, what is the deal behind the Godfather?
That came from my SiriusXM gig. I just celebrated our 20th anniversary of our program there here in Daytona Beach. And one of the midday hosts from days gone by, they asked who was there first. And he said, well, Moody was here first. He's kind of like the godfather of the channel, and we've all just followed along. And you know how it is in radio, my friend. You say something once, and the listeners never forget. And I've been there forever now.
That's awesome, and it sure has carried on. By the way, congratulations on 20 years with that program. Always fantastic content for NASCAR fans and media alike, and able to set the record straight with some fans that may not know better. And I got to know, you've been in this business since '83, just over 40 years at the pinnacle of this sport. Do the butterflies still hit the same when you go through that tunnel into Daytona International Speedway?
Absolutely, they do. You always get that feeling of awe when you roll through that tunnel, and even more so. And I got it last night. You know, standing up on the Sunoco Tower at the exit of Turn 2, when those race cars come by on the first parade lap, and you know in a minute that they're going to be wide open at 198 or 201 miles an hour. If the hair doesn't stand up on the back of my neck one of these years, I'll know that it's time to quit. But it still does.
Let's start with qualifying the other night. An all-Ford front row this year certainly does break up the Hendrick parade we've seen the last several seasons. An all-yellow front row as well there as far as the paint schemes go. First 500 pole for Roger Penske. First all-Ford front row since 2012. So qualifying went well for the Fords. We look at the duels. It went well for Toyota. What do the Fords got to do here to keep it solid throughout the race, especially Stewart-Haas?
Yeah, I think they're going to be just fine. Joey Logano was strong. Michael McDowell was very strong. Todd Gilliland actually was very strong in his duel last night. You know, it's very interesting because for Toyota, qualifying, time trial qualifying was an absolute disaster. They had nobody in the top 20. But when it came down to, to getting down to business last night in the pack racing, they were right there. So, there's what you can do out there all by yourself, and there's what you can do out there in a group, and that's where the driver comes in too. Knowing how to make the right move and knowing how to not make the wrong move at the wrong time. That's a big part of trying to win here at Daytona.
One of those Toyotas, as a matter of fact, is a Hall of Famer, 7-time champion, 2-time Daytona 500 winner, Jimmy Johnson. Could we ever imagine going into this weekend that he was going to be racing his way in to the Great American Race, specifically on the final corner?
It got a lot closer than he wanted it to, that's for sure. And J.J. Yaley did a tremendous job. That was more than a David versus Goliath kind of story because, that tiny little team, New York Racing, they show up once, maybe twice a year. The car that he drove last night, I don't know for sure, but I think that might be their only race car. That is a tiny, tiny, tiny little team going up against Legacy Motor Club and Jimmy Johnson that have got full Toyota factory support. So the fact that J.J. Yaley came 100 yards away from keeping the 7-time champion Jimmy Johnson from qualifying really was a pretty amazing story.
It was incredible, and also props to B.J. McLeod as well in that other dual race. And that bucket seat for NY Racing, I believe it was made for Greg Biffle. So J.J. Yaley being able to come in there just days before was an amazing story.
Really was, and J.J., he's one of those journeyman drivers. Had a shot with Joe Gibbs Racing. The time just wasn't right, and it didn't work the way anybody wanted it to. And he's gone on to have kind of a journeyman career racing, for teams that are in the second half of the field, so shall we say. But make no mistake about it, he is a very talented driver, and we certainly saw that in the duel.
Absolutely. Duel 1 and Duel 2, Tyler Reddick and Christopher Bell, the two Toyotas, win those. Jimmy Johnson, Kaz Gralla raced their way in. Let's go ahead and get to Sunday. Gone are the days of waiting out the big one in the back and moving to the front in the final 10 to 15 laps. You really have to fight for every position, all 200 and extra. If you would, describe how much these drivers really have to face that in recent years.
Well, you're right, and a couple of very important things have changed here in the last 3 to 5 years. First and foremost is we've got this new Gen 7 race car, and the parity from the front of the field to the back of the field is so much more than it ever was before. The days of Dale Earnhardt or anyone else going 22nd to the win in the final 18 laps at Talladega, those days are gone because everybody's got a good car now. There are probably 30 drivers and teams out there that have a realistic chance of winning the Daytona 500 on Sunday. The other thing is the advent of stage points. You used to be able to, if you wanted to, just kind of fall to the back and lollygag around and just wait for the final 50 or 60 laps to go racing. You can't afford to do that now because we're paying stage points 3 times every race, and you cannot afford to get locked out of those because they're just too valuable at the end of the season.
In the last 10 Daytona 500s, only Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin among active drivers have actually won the 500 and were able to win additional races in those respective seasons. Our last 3 500 champions, Michael McDowell, Austin Cindric, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., were able to do that and then nothing else. So that brings up the question, in your opinion, do you think the 500 may have become a bit of a lottery where luck dictates more who wins, or what's that balance between luck and skill going into this year?
Luck has always been a factor in super speedway racing. When you're running 6 inches apart from 5 other cars at all times, it doesn't take much of a mistake to become a big mistake. So yes, quote-unquote luck is a bigger factor at Daytona and Talladega, and now to a degree at Atlanta than at some of the other racetracks. But with that said, if you look at the guys that seem to have the best luck, they have it over and over and over again at tracks like this. And it's guys like Denny Hamlin, and it's guys like Michael McDowell. Corey LaJoie has never won, but he's always up front at the super speedways. That's not necessarily been true elsewhere. So there is a very specific skill set that's required to fare well in these races. And you look at other guys, Martin Truex Jr. has been here 19, he's run 19 Daytona 500s, has never won. Kyle Larson, this will be his 10th Daytona 500. He's never won. So, right. There's a skill set involved, and if you have it, you tend to be lucky here.
And also Kyle Busch at RCR, 20 years of trying. Does that sound any familiar?
It does indeed. And, Kyle is one of those guys. Most of the guys in the garage, when you ask them about things like that, they'll say, I don't pay attention to the numbers. I don't really know about that. I'm just here to race. Kyle is honest enough to say, oh, heck yeah, I know that number is out there. I'm not happy about it. And winning the Daytona 500 is a big goal for me because I want to check that box.
Dave, it's a privilege to be able to talk with you today. Thank you so much. The graduate of Ken Squire High School and Barney Hall University. Pretty sure you're going to be a future Hall of Famer. We appreciate you very much. Don't miss the 66th running of the Great American Race, the Daytona 500 live coverage from MRN this Saturday afternoon at 12:30 on WLIJ. Dave, have a wonderful weekend and a great season. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you so much, guys. Couldn't do it without you.
It's the 66th running of the Daytona 500, Sunday afternoon at 12:30 with live coverage from the Motor Racing Network on WLIJ. Proud to be Middle Tennessee's radio home for the NASCAR Cup Series. 98.7 and AM 1580, also on WLIJradio.com and the free mobile app. Search for WLIJ 98.7 on the App Store and Google Play.